Hi there, it's Rachel Thexton with Rachel Thexton Connects. When we think about mental health and consider challenges that many of us face, we realize that we know very little about the brain and that current treatment methods, recovery methods, well, they're imperfect and they don't work for everyone. The data doesn't look great. My next guest has a different approach to mental health challenges. He's a behavioral expert, an author, and a speaker, and he has a different way of thinking about mental health. I present to you Randy Taylor, behavioral expert, author, and speaker. Coming up next on Rachel Thexton Connects. Okay, so today I am curious, extremely curious to welcome my next guest. His name is Randy Taylor. He's a behavioral change expert, a motivational keynote speaker, and an author. I was having some tech problems prior to signing into this podcast, and he guided me through those with patience and logic based on a lot of which we'll discuss today, I would imagine. Randy, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking the time.
Great to be here. Congratulations on the show too.
Thank you.
It's such a wonderful undertaking to take something you had an idea and now, it's this show. So good for you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Randy, when we first start an episode, I just want to jump to the questions right away, but I want to start in this case by really just finding a little bit about you versus the work that you do, just so that we can set the stage for who we're speaking with and who you are. So I understand that you have had to overcome quite a bit of adversity. You were homeless at the age of 14, had struggles early in life. So can you tell me a bit about your journey from there to where you are today?
You just don't stop. Yeah, you're a great broadcaster. I spent 20 years in broadcasting, so you're good at this. And I would always start off an interview by saying, the message is important, but let's learn about the messenger. So I started out that way. I was fortunate enough to have trials and tribulations happen in Canada, right? So if you're going to fall down, it's a good place to fall. So I grew up in poverty and parent alcoholism and ended up homeless on the streets at 14. So, that's kind of that start in life, and it makes you, the experiences that we have, they create the files in the subconscious mind that make us, make certain choices. It's interesting that every time we have a thought or we take an action, we're not aware that we're doing it, but in a millisecond, we open the files in the subconscious mind and say, what do we know about this? Right. So at the time, the files I was opening said, not much is possible for you, kid, right? Because you're homeless and your mother picked a bottle over you and you have nothing. And so you don't have much to shoot for. But sometimes the right people will come along. Age 16, the day I left high school, my guidance counselor tried for an hour to talk me out of leaving, and he couldn't. I had to eat. And he stopped me on the way out the door and he said, I want you to know something. And I said, what's that, sir? He said, I want you to know that where you are now has nothing to do with where you can go. And I'll be honest, in that moment, the skies weren't parting and the angels weren't singing. It wasn't a Hollywood moment, but I guess there were words that I needed to hear. And, I left school and went and started in manual labor jobs, and his words kept coming back. And I kept hearing his voice, and I started wondering, what if he's right? Because basically what he was saying is, listen, kid, I can't change yesterday. I'm sorry for that, but you can change tomorrow. Right. And so you start to push back against your own thoughts, and you start to push back against what the world says. And we were not picked as the doctors and lawyers and leaders of industry. We were picked as the kids who might stay out of jail, might stay off drugs, might stay alive. Right. So manual labor went from that into jobs in sales. I owned a couple of small companies over the years. Decided at age 28, something that I had always wanted to do. On a dare, I called a local radio station to find out how you get in radio, and got an invitation to come in and have a tour of the station. And at the end of it, he said, we have an opening for an overnight announcer on weekends. Would you like to try this?
Wow.
And it offered $4.25 an hour. So you can't turn that down. So I left my great job in sales with a company car and suit and tie and expense account, and started in radio. Just loved it. When you do what you love, it just changes everything, and work so hard and you have no idea what you're doing. And I left my job in sales and I cleaned swimming pools and I sold cars and I worked in grocery stores midnight till 8 o'clock in the morning, stocking shelves, and just did anything and everything. And it's always easy to, to tell the Coles Notes version. And over 20 years, ended up making it to the number one radio station in Canada, the CFRB 1010 in Toronto, and off to spend a year at Global Television. And then almost 23 years ago, started Tailor-Made Leadership to do this. And I've been fascinated my whole life about human behavior. What is it that allows one person to have incredible success, right? Somebody like Elon Musk that starts out with nothing and becomes, set aside his personality and all that stuff, but what he has accomplished is extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And somebody else that ends up homeless on the streets of Toronto. Same person, same country, same opportunities. And so I've been studying human behavior for 35 years. And I'm just fascinated by, trying to unwind that and understand the mind and how, all the information that we take in, it impacts the choices that we make and the decisions we embark on or don't embark on, and ultimately the people that we become.
Did your work in broadcasting, as you were, interviewing folks and connecting with them, did that also influence your desire to really expand on your work with direct connection in supporting people?
Yeah. So broadcasting was just a wonderful, incredible time. It was 20 years in broadcasting, and most of it was in major market in the Toronto market, and then a year in television. And that was really fun. One day was horribly challenging. It was the day of 9/11, and I was on the air in the afternoon, and we didn't know what it was, and we didn't know if the world was at war, and that was a very unsettling time. But I always had this voice inside of me that said I wanted to work with people, right? To help them to help them to learn all this that I had learned about human behavior. If you change your behavior, it changes the outcome. And no one is stuck. So I work corporately. I started this company, Tailor-Made Leadership, for 20 years, and work corporately a lot with individuals and sales teams and executives on helping them to master behavioral performance. How do I go from here to here? So that was the work. And then, started noticing a couple of years ago in individuals that I was working with that they were having challenges beyond, just the corporate structure. They were, struggling with things that we never talked to other people about. They had anxiety. They had issues of low confidence and self-esteem, and they're sitting in a boardroom meeting and their leg is shaking under the table because their anxiety is so bad. And, they don't want anybody to find out because then their life will fall apart and, all the rest of it. So I started, looking into this, and I started working with these people on, my approaches to this, and then talked to more and more of them and found out that, the majority of them had been in therapy. Mm-hmm. And so, I started finding out what the therapy was, what they were doing in therapy. And I started learning, and from my understanding, what was happening was it was all wrong. And these people predominantly were not getting better. Several times it made them worse. And so in essence, very quickly, from a scientific perspective, what happens is that we have a thought, have an experience, and the information from that goes in here, right? If you look at this, it goes in this file. In the subconscious mind, I wear this file out all the time in meetings and the rest of it. So you have a file that says, here's how you turn on your microphone. And you have another one that says, here's how you make coffee and how you drive your car and how you do, right? So you have all these files, and it's an amazing process for us as a species that we don't have to relearn everything. So imagine how many times you've turned the microphone on to start an interview. So your file of turning on a microphone is pretty large. The file of making coffee is pretty big, right? So the more that we think about it, talk about it, access it, the bigger the file becomes, the more dominant it becomes. So for learning and education and skill development, it's amazing. But when we access the information from past negative experiences, it's not.
Right.
It's a past trauma. It's a failed marriage. It was a difficult childhood. It was the loss of a loved one, whatever it was. And the more we think about it, you don't have to lose the loved one again. Just thinking about the situation puts more paper in the file, right? And then the file gets larger and larger and larger. And then more and more we start to become triggered. I was talking to a client this morning about an ex-boyfriend that she had, and she's just triggered every time she sees a guy with curly blonde hair. And, and it just takes her back to all the terrible things that went on in their relationship and what happened with her. So these triggers end up happening. And what I found out with the people that I was working with is that the therapist that they were working with kept talking about what's in the file. And every person I work with, this file folder is probably the best prop I've ever used in my life, because people go, oh, I get that. And then, asked about the experience of the therapist. Yes, let's talk about your failed marriage again. And how is it impacting you now? And here's ways to deal with your failed marriage. And how is it impacting your relationships today? Are you judging your new girlfriend by right? So all of these things. So what are we doing? So, but with that approach, are we putting more paper in the file or less? What's the answer?
Okay, so
what's the answer?
The answer is more.
More.
You've got basically a portfolio at this point in the file. I would assume it would be a portfolio.
Massive. Which is why you then get triggered, which is why it causes anxiety and stress and fear. And we're living in our heads like that past marriage is right there again.
Right.
Right? Yeah.
Or often past experiences that you will bring into your marriage or your, right?
Yeah. Because the file is still there. And so the problem, the struggle, when people are trying, there's 65 million people in North America right now in therapy. And the struggle with this, and the therapists are, they're doing, I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus. I'm here to just talk about the scientific process of how to actually overcome all the stress and fear and anxiety of past events. So the answer is you can't think this file away. Don't see an elephant.
Right.
How's that working? Right?
Yeah.
The only way to change this is to not think away this file. It's to create a new one. Right? So it's called inverse subconscious reprogramming, which over time makes the individual believe the truth, the opposite of what, they're overlaying on everything now. Fear of flying is one of the great examples that 70% of the population have convinced themselves of a lie that they're going to die in the safest form of travel on earth.
Right.
Right. So yeah, it's crazy.
So when you say build a new file, are you referring to building a new neural pathway in the brain? When I was in a treatment program for anyone who watches the podcast knows this, quite some time ago, I struggled with substance use while I was running my business, leading kind of a double life. Actually, initially drugs were prescribed to me due to a back injury and fear of flying.
Really? And
one way that one of the staff when I was in treatment spoke to me about building those new neural pathways was kind of, there was this way that people were walking on the carpet and the path had become that way because people always took that path, right? And he was explaining that, he was describing building a new neural pathway in the brain as we cannot take this path anymore, even though it's the easiest and simplest and most convenient to us. It's not working for us. So we have to, and he was using that carpet indentation that people were making in their path out the door as an analogy. So you're speaking to building a new neural pathway in the brain. How does one do that? It's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, so it's inverse subconscious programming. If the person's, fear of flying, again, it's an easy example to talk about. So we know that it's irrational to be afraid. We can talk about it logically, unless you're afraid to fly. And now you're about to go to the airport and now you don't feel so confident anymore, right? So statistically, you're 600 times more likely to die in your car on the way to the airport than the plane. So inverse programming is not, the neural pathway is merely the intake of the information. The storage of the files is in a neural net, a cluster of cells in the brain held together with synapses, right? So we have to input new information. So the old file says, I'm going to die. That turbulence I feel, is going to knock the plane out of the sky. Inverse programming says, I am the luckiest person in the world. I absolutely, more than anything, love to fly. I am so exhilarated when the plane leaves the earth. It's an apartment building in the sky. It just astounds me, the engineering. And as we fly on to the destination, these wonderful people bring me drinks and food, and there's a washroom, and I can watch movies. And within a couple of hours, I'm out of the snow and I'm in the sand and in the ocean. I absolutely, it's the favorite way to travel in the world, flying. And the first time you say that, your brain says, BS, the plane's going to crash.
Right.
But by doing this through an intentional and structured way, I create recordings for people so that they can really visualize what's being said in the reprogramming, and they feel the emotions of being in ownership of it again and again and again and again. And the brain, it doesn't have a choice. If you input that information often enough, then it will start to convince you of what's in the new file instead of the old one. Right. It's interesting you talked about the carpet. I have a client down in New York, and we were talking one day about being stuck in a certain way. And I showed her a video that was online, and it was this bear, a black bear, and it had come from some terrible place that had it tied up to a pole on a chain. The chain was maybe 10 feet long. And so all the bear could do with this chain around its neck tied to a pole was walk in a circle. And it was chained up there for years. And they showed the bear in this zoo, in this big enclosure, and the bear kept walking in circles and walking in circles and had this big rut in the ground, and there was no chain. And that's what happens, is that we believe that we're shackled. When you talk about substance abuse, my mom was an alcoholic. I lost my oldest daughter 2 years ago to a drug overdose.
I'm sorry.
And I'm working with clients now one client's an alcoholic, and I'm taking a completely different approach than the world ever does. Because, typically people would say, well, you should join Alcoholics Anonymous. And I would say, hello, my name is Randy. I'm an alcoholic. What am I doing? I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an alcoholic.
Yes.
I drink. So let's not want to drink when I talk about it every day.
Yes.
And
I agree.
He's about 30, 38 or 40 days completely clean, not troubled by it at all, is completely focused on this incredible new life that we're crafting for him. And he's putting all this information into a new file, and it's working. So
it's interesting you say that, because I went early in my relationship with my husband. I used to go to NA meetings years ago. I'm not a fan of the program. For those which the program works and has helped to become healthy, I support that. Everyone's journey is different. For me, it was exactly as you describe it. And my husband asked me after coming out, it was an open meeting, so he joined me in the meeting. This was before we were married. And he said, I just don't get how that's helpful. It seemed as though we sat there and spoke about using drugs for an hour and then left. Now, I know that's not always the way the conversations go, but they are often, and I know that connection point in the meetings is one of the great elements of that program is connection, yes, but it is often that repetitive piece of reminding, and it would actually trigger me to go to meetings. It would trigger me. And so I stopped, and the program did not work for me. And I've mentioned that before. It just did not work for me. So that's interesting. You're adding to that file via, reminding.
There was a study a number of years ago. And for people who are listening who, are struggling, particularly with drug abuse. Mm-hmm. My mother was made a drug addict by doctors with too many prescriptions and made her a drug addict. So, that happens an awful lot. But there was a study of Vietnam vets who came back from the war. I have friends who were in Vietnam, and the drug abuse was just to be able to not lose your mind every day. There were, people walking around with scalps on their belts. It was just insanity personified. And the study said that probably 70% of the vets who came back from Vietnam were heroin addicts.
Mm-hmm.
But shockingly, well over 50% came home, never touched it again. And you know what the recidivism rate is in, drug and alcohol abuse. You got maybe a 15% chance of winning based on the current approach, right?
Yes, yes.
And what they found was that they completely changed their environment. And because what did they do? They removed all of the triggers. I'm in the jungles in Vietnam. Now I'm on the streets of Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm.
And so the environment was so completely different. They detached from all the triggers. And so it gave them that leg up as a starting point. So this whole issue that, one of the things that I work with people the most consistently on, and it's absolutely proven scientifically, is that when you are focused here on this exact moment in time, look at the camera right now.
I'm looking at you, but if I look at the camera, I'm not looking at you anymore directly.
But look at the camera. Look
Okay.
right into the camera, right?
Okay.
So when you're here, focused on this exact moment in time, and you were zeroed in and taking in everything that's on the screen, your brain is processing that, and you can't be there. Right. So improving our ability to focus is the starting point of all of it. When you're here, you can't experience anxiety. When you're here, you can't be stressed. When you're here, everything comes from here, right? Quality of life, creation,
right,
enjoyment, like everything. So really working to help people to focus is so important.
Yeah, I want to. Okay, so the approach is called therapy. So I assume that's being there.
Yeah. So it's the play on words is that it's therapy, which means it's working with people to overcome their past struggles and traumas of the past and all the hypothetical fears of the future, typically overlaid because of that, right? So I was in a bad marriage, so therefore, I'm judging my new partner by that. I had a bad boss before, so now I'm assuming this one's going to be like that. So we end up living there, which, and we talked before the show started, that science shows the average adult is here focused on this exact moment in time no more than 10 to 15% of the day. So of our waking minutes a day, 1,020, 867 of those minutes, we are not here. We're lost.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something, Randy. Why have you chosen to, it seems as though your focus, and correct me if I'm wrong, has been more on working with those in the professional space, in the corporate world. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So why have you chosen that route? I've always said that I believe that mental health challenges, and especially substance use challenges, hide out in the corporate workplace. Because there may be the biggest HR manual in the world saying we'll support you, but the stigmas and stereotypes are alive and well. So is that part of why? Explain to me why the corporate workplace.
No, I mean, really, honestly, I mean, I, studied all of this for 35 years and, read everything, some of the top people in this business, guys like Jim Rohn, who was Anthony Robbins' mentor, and, just learned so much. And I mean, quite honestly, when you're working in this space of, personal and professional development and peak performance behavioral work, the people who pay you are the people who can afford you, who are the people who want to improve their game. So that most of it, came out of just the existence of here's what I do and here's who needs it. Right. So now in transitioning into working more with people one-on-one, and we're just putting together a one-day retreat right now to spend an entire day with people to go through all this process of how you overcome all this distracted thought and fear and anxiety and all the rest of it, has been without question the most rewarding work I have ever done. I've driven a race car in my life. I lived on the streets. I was in radio and television for 20 years. I ran for federal office in Canada in 2000. I've written 3 books. I have 5 kids. I have spoken all over North America. I've been on stage at Skydome in front of 50,000 people speaking. This, I promise you, is the most rewarding work I've ever done, because to see somebody
Yes.
move past
Find
those
success in their life.
crazy, it just, and you find out what was holding them back is a hologram of a memory of an experience that's gone.
Yes.
And you look at that and go, really, is that why I'm like this? Yep. That thing was 2 weeks ago. It was 2 decades ago. But it's still, right? It still creates that, that file that haunts us, and anyone can go over it.
Randy, I worry with the time. I might need to get you for about 10 or 15 minutes to complete the episode properly in order to substantiate, really get what we have here. I don't need to go through all these questions, but I think to have a good full picture of who you are and what you do, maybe we can have 10 or 15 minutes, whether it be today, tomorrow, the next day.
I'm good for the next 10 minutes, so go ahead.
Okay, so that's what I was going to say. I was going to ask you one or two more questions and then maybe get you for 10 more minutes on another day. Okay, we'll reproduce this, so that will obviously come out. If we can just move over to trauma for a second. So trauma, obviously, we're looking at, often very intensive, strong, stubborn experiences that affect people in very intensive ways. Hard to shake is an understatement. How do you approach clients with traumatic memories, ones that are, so strong that they've brought them to serious PTSD, perhaps substance use disorder and such?
So we tend to label people in the world. And one of the things I want to make very clear is my approach to this is that, mental health issues or mental illness, unless there is like a diagnosed schizophrenia or something like that, we put everyone in that basket. ADD, ADHD, on and on and on. There is nothing wrong with a person's brain. And when we label people, I have one young guy, he's 12 years old, was labeled with multiple anxiety disorder. And you label somebody and then they own that and they go, I'm broken, right? It's like, no, Leo's not broken. There's nothing wrong with him. He has huge files in his brain that has created this. And by the way, Leo's better now. So it was really tragic for everybody to label Leo with a condition, because when you talk about anxiety, stress, fear, PTSD, think about this from a medical standpoint. Is there an injury? No. A pathogen? No. A virus? No. What is it? It's information in a file. And PTSD is it's another name for, a massive file that when there's exceptional emotion connected to an event, it instantly makes the file larger. That's why we remember 9/11 and, major moments in life. But it is exactly the same thing. Matt, one of the guys that I'm working with, 20 years of PTSD. His mother stuck a pen in his leg when he was 3, taken away and put in child services and abused and beaten until he was able to leave at 18. Went into the armed forces, went to Afghanistan. All his friends were blown up in front of him. He's been in therapy for 20 years, and he reached out to me online, canceled twice because he just didn't believe in anything. And then finally we started working together, and that was 4 months ago. He was on his couch, couldn't get off his couch, living like a hoarder, wouldn't brush his teeth. And he sent me a few days ago, I can't show this online, but he sent me the video of his new place on the beach in Panama.
Wow, that's a good place to be.
I saw this and I started to cry because I was like, this guy was so broken. And so again, it's a label. Did he have horrible things happen in his past? Yes. It's in the past. It's gone. It's a file, right? We can overcome those. And it's important to recognize and own that, right?
Now, I have to ask you, one of the things that excites me about your approach is that it is different. I agree completely. I think it's unacceptable the way that we have let the rates of recovery, whether it be from mental health challenges or substance use challenges, stay in the state they're in, so low. we're giving people, essentially very little hope when they look at the data that they have a chance. And that again adds to that file, right? That goes into that file. But I have to ask you about, because I'm sure, other schools of thought, cognitive behavior therapy, which I've done in the past, unfortunately, it did not work for me, but has worked for some maybe. Yes, it has worked for some, clearly, but did not work for me. How would you describe your study of neuroscience? And I have to ask about certifications. And are you ever questioned on that? And what are your thoughts on certifications in treating such serious or supporting those with serious mental health challenges?
Yeah, very, very good question. Very important. So you brought up the statistical results of healing in a very, very highly regulated world. So, 15%, maybe 20% that, people do not, there's no recidivism in that. So those are with all certified and very qualified people. And again, I'm not here to throw sand in anybody's face. I'm just talking about the reality. So you're right. Those numbers are terrible. And so am I certified? No. Am I wildly qualified? Yes. When you have Fortune 500 companies pay you to come in and play around with the minds of their top people, you have to know what you're doing. And I have studied this for 35 years, and I've worked in the sandbox of actually driving results in behavioral performance in real life. So I had my own personal experience, 35 study, 22 years of experience of driving results at the corporate level and executive level. And now virtually every person that I'm working with, it's working for them.
Okay.
It's up to people. Would it be nice if I was recognized in insurance programs and that would pay for it? Sure, because there's barriers for for people to do that. One of the other things that I do as well that's important is when I start working with someone like Matt, who was really, really in bad shape, I reached out to him like every day or two.
Mm-hmm.
And, not on the clock, just he needed to know that, he wasn't alone. There was somebody there with him. We were a team. And that was part of it too, right? I mean, if I start working with somebody and they're really in a bad spot for the first while, I'll kind of shadow them and, stay in touch. And I think that that's important too. And it doesn't happen in the clinical, the clock is running and, it's over and, give me my money and I'll see you next week.
Yeah. We'll pause right in the middle of the moment when I really needed to keep talking.
Yeah. And it's, and then you feel very alone. Right. So,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. I have a couple of final questions for you, Marian. First of all, have you ever reconnected with that guidance counselor who gave you those words that have stuck with you for so many years?
No, but I have a plaque. I wish. Mr. Grutzinger. He's passed quite some time ago. So imagine I had to end up starting to work with, big companies and, things like this. And when you have a grade 10 education, it's pretty, unnerving. Everybody around you's got an MBA and, everything else. And it's, you don't feel all that much a part of something. But so I went on with my life and I started this career in broadcasting and did all these things. And I got a call from my high school one day and the plaque is on the wall in another office here. And they said they were starting a wall of fame and they wanted to induct me. And I had grade 10. So it was like it just meant everything.
Must have felt great.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. What do you feel is currently missing from mental health support and what's next for you?
I mean, what's missing, I think, is, I don't know, just a better connection to the people that are struggling.
Yeah.
A new approach.
Right.
Because, this talking about what's in the file, literally every client I work with, 80% have gone to therapists. And they said, they kept doing that. And I would leave the session and I didn't feel well. Right.
Right.
And I just don't understand if we've been doing something this long and it's not working, that it needs to be, revisited. There are incredible groups of people so much more educated formally than I am, but I know this works, right? And I get to see it happen And it truly, it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Amazing. If you're not aware, Randy Taylor has written two books.
Two or three or four. Yeah. So this is The Lost Journals is a fable.
Okay.
Elevate is a self-help book.
Okay.
Another one that's my first book. It's not in print anymore, but it was called Life Before Kant, which is the fact that we were all born with a perfect belief system.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
Until we meet the world. Yeah. And build our file.
But you can build a new one.
Amazing. Randy Taylor, a behavioral change expert, motivational keynote speaker, and author, Therapy. He's taking a new approach to supporting those with mental health challenges. It's been a great conversation. Randy, I look forward to keeping track of where you're heading. I'm following you online, and I'll include your handle and social media information below the episode. Thank you for joining me today.
Really nice to be here. Just wanted to mention, if anyone wants to learn more or have a conversation, the first session is no cost. So if you want to, find out more about this and see if it's for you, let me know. Rachel, God love you for what you're doing. You're good at this and you're making a difference, and keep going. Yeah.
Thank you. No one's ever told me that, and I appreciate you saying that.
True.
That I'm making a difference.
You are.
Just a tiny difference is what I wanted to do. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Be kind and truly connect. You're listening to the Rachel Thexton